Okay, so Oksana's interview with Dr. Nabarro on Ebola is a very good interview, and I want to talk about it in terms of the sovereignty of the states involved. They being at this stage Ebola countries in West Africa, so-called Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, and you have Mali with 3 or 4 cases or something like this at the moment. But what happens after Ebola? What happens after we have all of these hospitals being built? Ebola, let's say, contained, because I think the containment of Ebola is what could happen here. The situation could, as it seems to be in Liberia, but not in Sierra Leone or elsewhere, abate once funeral practices and so forth are brought into line with what people want and the medical people want in those countries. But it seems to me to be difficult to say that Ebola will be eradicated. It will need continual monitoring, and the hospital systems will need to be very good. That seems all so obvious, and it all seems to be taken for granted that the UN, the US, and others are building an infrastructure, quite a big infrastructure, a health infrastructure. And my question is, who is going to own it after Ebola, after the Ebola fright starts to diminish? Because I don't think the Ebola epidemic, talking about that, and I guess knocking on the door of epidemiology, I don't think that the epidemic is going to stop, just like other epidemics have come and gone. Eventually it will, I suppose, but I don't think that's in our foresight at this point. And this is, I regard this as really important. I think that you can't go into another person's country and set up an infrastructure and then say to the other, the country concerned, well, here's the bill, and here's the maintenance of it, because the thing is going to be maintained, and it's been proven over the last several decades that the West African economies can't support a health infrastructure like this. Are we talking about a UN mandate? Has this been agreed by anybody to sustain these hospitals after the fright? I call it a fright because I think that sooner or later it's going to stabilize. As I say, I can't see Ebola stopping, but it's going to stabilize in terms of some kind of contained situation. Furthermore, even if it is eradicated, and I'm using the word eradicated very, very tentatively, even if it is stopped, there needs to be a comprehensive health system in place so that it doesn't happen again. So let's run over the usual suspects. Is this just a new form of colonialism? Do people like Naomi Wolf and her ideas of the other week, do they start to matter and to cut in once we get into this type of analysis? Is the idea that the far-flung idea, as it seems, and put in this clip, at this interview, excellent interview by Oksana of Nabarro, and his excellent responses. His responses I thought were pretty good, but I don't think they address what I'm talking about, and I'm quite concerned that they didn't. And that's, I guess, because of the nature of the discourse. And I've also got to say that what I'm talking about, I can't see anywhere else at all. That's why I'm posting. I can't see anybody saying, well, who's going to monitor all this? Who's going to run it? Who's going to pay for it? After it, that is, by it, I mean this huge infrastructure of hospital care, of medical care, which involves hospitals, it involves outreach workers, it involves a whole economic situation here in Accra, of all places, where the UN have set up in Accra, and they're looking after what's happening in Sierra Leone, Liberia, now Mali, and in this West African situation. If we go back to the point made in the interview from a policeman, I believe, in Liberia, who said, and I paraphrased the interview, and I've posted the interview besides this, so you can easily check it out, that Ebola is an invention of whites to kill blacks. Leave that question there for a minute. Think about the proposition that Ebola is working so that black people in West Africa will no longer control their health infrastructures. They will no longer be in a position to control it, because the sustenance of these things, the maintenance of them, is going to be on the basis, as it were, of global security, so to speak, global health security. It's going to be necessary for these health infrastructures to stay in place. I think there's a whole set of hairs that start running here, and a whole set of things that need to be answered, and I don't think we're remotely near it. Partly because, and Oksana rightly in the interview pushes the button on militarization, and that's very, very apt and a good question, and well responded to, I thought, by Navarro. But I think that in itself is a bit of not exactly a red herring, but I don't think it's coming to the point that I'm making at all. I think just because you have soldiers in there, even if the soldiers are armed, that doesn't necessarily mean military occupation. I think what it means is the establishment of a health infrastructure using the military. Well, you could use civil engineers, you could use a whole host of people to do that. It happens to be that the military are being used. Now then, does that then ensue that military occupation will occur, which means colonization, which means the military dictatorship, really, or military control from without? Because they're not Liberian soldiers or soldiers of the Sierra Leonean or Guinean armies. They're American soldiers, and we're seeing a whole lot of Chinese, Cubans, others going in there without military aspects. But I think that if they were called upon for whatever reasons to have military people involved, they would. And I still don't see that it's necessarily tracking towards military occupation. I see it as tracking towards the establishment of health structures and infrastructures that will need to be sustained from without afterwards. My point being that will we be looking at some kind of negotiation with the African Union? Will we be looking at some kind of development of the UN? Will we be talking about the World Health Organization, the WHO, actually having more legs than it's got, if I can put it that way, or had so far in its history? We're already dependent on WHO for a lot about Ebola, and that particularly applies to information. We keep it, for example, this last week or so, it's gone over 5,000 deaths, and we're talking 13,500 or something reported cases. And where are the reports coming from? WHO. We're going to keep depending on WHO for accurate information about Ebola in these West African states, rather than the reports from the governments concerned. And so already in that situation, in this situation, we're seeing a displacement of official reporting by nation states to official reporting by world so-called bodies. How good are these world bodies at doing this? Well, we trust them. And I think I'm going to leave it there, but excellent interview. One or two questions I think, though, not directly confronted. And I think that's partly because of the heat of the discourse that when that interview went to air a couple of weeks ago, I don't think the discourse had settled sufficiently, so if you can take my point, to allow the sort of question I'm asking you with Peter Cleave.